Welcome to Hobo Screen Recordings with I Got the Casual. This is Mike, and I'm here with Leah, who prefers to remain off camera, and I don't blame her. And so she asked me a very interesting question while we were watching Daily Summa this morning. And the Daily Summa is going through the Summa one page at a time, and they're at the section where St. Thomas refutes some popular atheist arguments that are, put forth in a very, erudite way. And so Leah asked me, what was it like? They were talking about like the first cause versus secondary causes. So like if the universe is a set of billiard balls running into each other, there has to be a pool cue. There has to be something that set them all in motion. And when I was an atheist, I thought basically God was just another billiard ball, just another thing in the universe, like a creature in the universe. Because, some of the sillier conceptions of God just seem to be like, well, there's an invisible man who lives in the sky and watches everything you do, and he made a list of rules and blah, blah, blah. And, this is sort of the George Carlin conception as I received it as a, 12-year-old. And yeah, it seemed ridiculous. So once that shifted, God started to seem more reasonable. And so Leah asked what that was like. And it just occurred to me that one of the websites that really provoked that shift for me still exists. So I'm going to try to find it real quick and just kind of walk through it and play with it a little bit. It's called Course in Consciousness. And it's a textbook by certain Stanley Sabatka. And the whole thing is or was online. I wonder if it got taken down or something, because it used to be just like super obvious. This is close. Haha! This is a re-upload of it. It used to be yellow, which is prettier, and I wonder if I can keep this on top so that I can see myself. Yeah. This is my hobo self view on the screen recording, so that I don't have to actually record the screen and you can still see what I'm doing. Very, very redneck live stream, which is fun for me. So this book here is like in three major sections: quantum theory and consciousness. So like involving the current state of material science, of physical science, like in the most normal secular understanding of it. The metaphysics of non-duality, and non-duality is the label given to like the mystical realization that all is one. There are no two things. There are two things like in a practical sense, like if I hit you, then yes, I am morally responsible. But on another level, it is bad for me to hit you because you are me. You are, emanate, from the same source as I do. So when I hit you, it actually harms me. And that's why it is wrong for me to harm you. So non-duality is, as I mentioned, the term given to the realization of the oneness of all of creation in God and because of God.
Is that Catholic?
It doesn't show up in Catholicism much, but the saints do talk about this in a certain way. I'm trying to remember. I can't off the top of my head remember an example.
It makes me think of, the body of Christ. If I harm another member of the body of Christ, I'm harming myself.
Yes. Right, because the body shares in the sufferings and the glories of each part shares in the sufferings and the glories of every other part. So yeah, that would be an example. Also, when well, I'll leave it there, and we'll see if other examples come up or if I find some later. And then part 3, the end of suffering and the discovery of our true nature. And this is sort of the mystical, traditions, the discovery of joy and suffering, and of what Catholics would call the 6th and 7th mansions, approached without knowledge of Jesus, just approached by the removal of illusion and pride and things like that. And I'm not exactly sure how that happens and what the differences are between when a Hindu experiences divine oneness and bliss while still alive, and when a Catholic experiences divine oneness and bliss while still alive. Like, what the differences are between those kinds of things is one of the great mysteries of my life right now. But in any case, it's an important part of my conversion story, because the experiences described by all of these mystics was so much more attractive than anything that I had heard of in the world. And so it was very appealing to go, oh, there's something to reach for here that is really, really worth it, that nothing in the world is like. So those are the 3 sections of this textbook, basically. And so he talks about classical physics, and goes all the way back, very basics of science and the foundations of where quantum physics and observability paradoxes, Schrodinger's cat, etc., come from, and how our interaction with physical reality changes what we observe scientifically. That's quantum physics. You have things like the double slit experiment, where if you observe a light particle under certain conditions, it acts like a particle. It hits a certain spot on the wall behind it. But if you observe light under different conditions, the light acts like a wave. It acts like it traveled through both slits and interfered with itself and leaves this sort of wave interference pattern on the wall behind it. And, well, how could it do that? And the weird thing is that the dependent factor on how it appears is whether we observe it or not. So consciousness has some material bearing on reality. And that's kind of the bridge scientifically between scientific materialism and spirituality. So it kind of allows a person who is curious about God to go, all right, maybe there's something going on here. It gives some credibility to entertaining spiritual reality in the absence of experience or faith.
So it's like a kind of a physical experiment, viewing light through a thing that lets you see there's more than you can actually see, and here's proof that there's more than you can actually see.
Yeah, it's a physical demonstration that consciousness matters in and of itself.
What is consciousness in this?
In this context, just like the fact that we are aware of things and have the ability to pay attention, and our free will decision about whether to pay attention or not affects how things physically manifest in the world.
Oh, our free will decision to pay attention affects how we view things.
It affects how things actually objectively are.
Okay, what does that mean?
So, do you know the Schrodinger's cat story? Do you know why that's a famous...
It's a cat in a box.
Yeah.
But you can't see the cat in a box. You just see the box. Therefore, you don't know if the cat is in the box. Or
not quite.
Something
about a dead cat in a box. So
I didn't take this
that's all right. Here, I have a whiteboard conveniently behind me, and I will super quickly and poorly draw a very, very bad version.
There's tissues over there.
Thank you. I don't think I need it. So Schrodinger's cat, you have a box. So what they were debating right now at this moment was, depending on how you observe a certain like subatomic particle, changes. Okay, so before you observe a certain subatomic particle in a certain context, it is in two different conditions at once. It's called a superposition. So you, instead of having an actual thing in there, it's actually both things at once, and it doesn't actually take a final shape until you look at it.
Is that true?
Yes, it is true. Yes, it is true. And it is most observably true on a super tiny micro subatomic level. And Schrodinger was making fun of this, and he used Schrodinger's cat as a way to try to debunk this idea and call it ridiculous. And the way it works is,
So he's trying to debunk the idea.
he's trying to debunk the idea that I just mentioned, that
Okay.
observation makes things turn out a certain way,
Oh.
or observation like collapses a probability. So, oh, this is the worst cat ever drawn on Earth.
Yep.
Wait, it needs a tail. All right, okay.
Okay, that's a little
You have
better.
Schrodinger's cat.
Don't worry about it.
Don't worry about it.
Plow forward.
Yes, and then
We can't see
let's
it anyways.
see.
It's in the box.
Schrodinger is proposing this situation.
Yeah.
Cat in the box. The cat is in a box with, let's say, like a little test tube of this, light particle or subatomic particle that
Okay.
has not been observed.
Okay.
So people are saying, since it hasn't been observed, it's in two different conditions. Like it's a radioactive particle that has either decayed and sent off a neutron, or has not decayed and has kept that neutron. And Schrodinger proposes that this test tube was put next to like a little vial of poison. I draw a skull and crossbones on it.
I'm sure. Okay.
And so, since this test tube has not been observed, it's in a superposition, which means when you open the box and look at it, you will find out whether the neutron decayed, popped the poison, and killed the cat, or whether it didn't. But in the meantime, since it's unobserved, it's a superposition. So Schrodinger is saying, in order for this stuff to be true, the cat has to be alive and dead at the same time, because you don't know until you've opened the box.
That is silly.
Right. It's a pretty good jibe at this understanding, at this interpretation of quantum physics.
Uh-huh.
I'm not going to go into it much further, but basically, that's where Schrodinger's cat comes from, and it's
But
not
wait,
actually.
Did he disprove this point then?
No, because
Sorry, becoming a class on Schrodinger's cat.
yeah, I actually did take a class on this. I forget what the rebuttal is. If I had to spontaneously make one up, it's that the cat is itself an observer, and so the cat, the cat knows whether it's alive or dead. The cat has seen whether this thing has decayed or not. So it doesn't have to be, observed by humans in order to know. But maybe if you're in the next room, I don't know, something like that. So
Okay. So come back to the interesting. Part.
interesting part.
That something. I just want to come back to the point so I don't forget it.
Right.
That something, our free will decision to observe actually changes whether or not something is.
Yeah. Our choices and our observation affect physical reality.
Can you give me an example? I mean, I get the light through the prism.
So, I actually used Schrodinger's cat to do an experiment on prayer time travel.
Okay.
And I was, applying for some grant or something, and I got the envelope back that would say whether I got it.
Right.
And even though the decision had been made in the past,
Right.
I prayed about it, with the intention of like receiving all the benefit of all the spiritual benefit of not having gotten the grant. This is, you know, like I imagine feeling the pain of disappointment of that, going through the emotions of that, going through the consequences of that, and just receiving the spiritual benefit of that so that it wouldn't help me for God to give me this gift of rejection in this context. And so even though the decision had been made in the past, I haven't opened up, you know, the file to see what it is yet. So I did that prayer and then I opened it up and it turns out I got the grant. Huh. And there was like an intuition that this was like a time travel prayer thing. Like I could feel my heart settle when the prayer was complete. Like, and sometimes I've kind of done this a lot, and I will often pray before opening an email or something, because there is a sense, and maybe this is just personal schizophrenia or scruples sometimes, but there's often a sense that, you know, don't observe this just yet, you know, or
yeah, you are weird like that.
Right, I am weird like that, and this is why. So the whole notion of quantum physics, yes, for an atheist, is a physical and extremely well demonstrated. Like quantum physics is basically the most experimentally demonstrated thing in science. It's been replicated just gazillions of times. So for an atheist who's like, you know, everything is just billiard balls, well, to have the most solid science in the world be coming to a conclusion like, depending on your decisions, certain billiard balls either exist or don't exist, like that's a pretty profound interruption to materialism. And so it gives an atheist an excuse to go, all right, maybe something else is going on.
Oh, like when, I think Plato even says, like, just believe. If you want to believe in God, just believe. Do the things that Christians do.
Yeah, and that might tie in somehow, especially like the decisions that we make, I'm sure, affect how things are presented to us in the physical world, but that's such a complex like calculation that it's hard to, you know, predict or connect A to B. But yeah, certainly, like the interior decisions we make affect the exterior reality that comes into being. That seems certainly true.
Right. Well, okay, so I'm going to be jumping ahead here, but
sure.
If an atheist decides not to observe God's actions in the world, does that mean that God does not exist?
No. I think you're kind of talking about two different kinds of phenomena at once that we could untangle or we'd come back to.
Maybe okay. I'll learn more along the way.
Okay, yeah, maybe. So anyway, in this book on consciousness, like in the first section is all this review of where quantum physics comes from in materialist science. And so it goes through this in summary, but in pretty good detail. Quantum theory, blah, 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 blah. And then it gets to the metaphysics of non-duality. And it says, I'm just catching up here, part 1 depended heavily on logic to make its points. But in order to understand part 2, we must invoke intuition as well, because certain things cannot be described logically. Parts of it are scientifically plausible and testable by experiment, and parts can never be tested. Parts are very verifiable within one's personal experience. Parts must be, dependent on trusting somebody else who tells it to you, like a sage or a spiritual teacher. And certain parts one cannot even really understand at all until one is an advanced spiritual practitioner. So this is the bridge between science on one hand and deep mystical spiritual teachings on the other. So it's an attempt to conceptualize something that cannot be conceptualized because it's outside the realm of concepts and logic. Blah, blah, blah. Contemporary spiritual teachers who delight in metaphysics. And, all right, so it goes through this stuff. I'm going to see if I can find some of the things. Blah, 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 blah. Okay, so here are a bunch of quotes from spiritual teachers that, I'm just opening this for the first time in years, so I don't exactly have a plan here, but this is an example of what I would have seen as like a 16, 17-year-old, curious person. This particular spiritual teacher says, when personal identification vanishes, you might just call that, well, I don't know. Maybe I don't want to try to forcefully interpret Eastern religion in the context of Catholicism, so I'll just say what it says. When personal identification vanishes, all that remains is a sense of presence without the person, which gets translated into a feeling of life as total freedom. It is impossible to describe the sense of magnificence that comes out of the true apperception of the nature of the individual. The loss of personal individuality is exchanged for the gain of the totality of the cosmos. The sage is happy and fully aware that happiness is his very nature and that he need not do anything nor strive for anything to secure it. It follows him more real than the body, nearer than the mind itself. You imagine that without cause there can be no happiness. To me, dependence on anything for happiness is utter misery. Pleasure and pain have causes, while my state is my own, totally uncaused, independent, unassailable. True happiness is uncaused, and it cannot disappear for lack of stimulation. It is not the opposite of sorrow. It includes all sorrow and suffering. So this kind of, smacks of great Catholic saints who find joy in suffering, that happiness and joy encompass and include suffering. They do not oppose one another. And so this is like the first place where I start hearing about these things and hearing about these experiences. Before this, I had not understood that there is such insane levels of happiness possible for a human being. I'm going to see if I can find a few more examples of that, because this was really some of the things that moved me.
And again, this is like moving you from
It's
the concept of God is silly to, oh wait, it might not be silly.
Yes, blah, blah, blah. Love seeking itself. Blah, 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 blah. Surrender, understanding by direct seeing. Okay, this is blah, 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 blah. One of the things I like about Eastern traditions is they have a very clear language for interior states, interior stuff. They talk about it with a level of clarity that approaches that of exterior stuff. Well, these are all like Eastern meditation practices. I'm trying to just find where they say, since that moment, I've felt nothing but complete eternal bliss that severely dwarfs, any sexual experience or any other kind of pleasure. And just living heaven on earth, and many different people saying that. Anyway, this is how this reached me. Part 1 is about the science. Part 2 is trying to kind of bridge part 1 and part 3. And part 3 is spiritual practices and talking about the nature of the soul, the self, and the state of complete freedom from illusion and limitation. It typically is called ego or self-identification, like focusing on myself or I, self-interest. But in a Catholic language, it could be called pride. That, the utter annihilation of pride. A lot of these guys, when they reach this level of annihilation of pride, a lot of them die pretty much right away because they're just not interested in preserving the body walking around. It does not seem important.
Do you mean they starve themselves, or they're just taken out of the world because they've already achieved the thing?
Some of each. Sometimes they're taken out of the world because they basically died, but on purpose, not in a suicidal way, but in a transcendence of self-interest so extreme that even the interest in preserving their own existence was not really there anymore. Sometimes, I've heard it reported that the union with all of creation and with the divine in however way that they understand that is so complete that their own body does not appear more important than anyone else's body or any other physical matter. And so whether it continues to wander around and feed itself is not much of a concern. They're just chilling out in a lifeguard seat of bliss forever.
Do you think that that's lacking a bit in the dignity of the body that God created? He could have just made us spirits, but he chose to make us embodied spirits.
Yeah, this is confusing, and this is I long for a proper comparative mystical theology here. I know that Thomas Merton did a lot of controversial investigating and discussing of Eastern religions alongside Catholicism. I'm quite confident that Peter Kreeft has read a lot of Eastern mysticism because of the way he talks about things. But this level of detail about, what Catholic theology says and what Eastern mystics report and how they sort of line up and where they diverge and what those divergences might mean. All that stuff is very interesting to me, and I'm not really aware of deep explorations of that. And also, maybe there are, but it's just in such serious academic situations that I haven't, delved into it. But yeah, where were we?
I don't know. I have two interesting takeaways from this conversation.
All right.
May or may not be related.
Okay.
First is about the light through the prism, and how if you don't observe it, it's not there. Something like that. How we can make a choice to observe something or not.
Right.
And that actually affects something. I don't know how that. I eventually would like to know how that applies to atheists who choose not to observe miracles in the world.
Got it. Okay, so when a miracle happens, it is an objective thing that happens in reality.
Mm-hmm.
Whether an atheist pays attention to it or not does not change the fact that it happened.
Mm-hmm.
So that's actually not quite an example of this. The example is I'll give an example. An example is when an atheist walks into a room and opens the door, what he sees inside will be a certain way. If that same person were a theist and had the Holy Spirit within him, when he opens that same door, the things he sees inside would be totally different.
Because of his perception?
Because our consciousness, our ability to be aware of things, the light that shines out through our eyes, you might say, has an effect on the physical world.
I keep thinking of examples that aren't this.
Yeah,
so
because it's hard to believe.
Grasp it.
Right, yeah.
Is it okay, so like for example, an atheist looks at a consecrated host and just sees a wafer.
No, because so do most Catholics.
Mm.
It's the hard part is it keeps sounding like I'm talking about interpretation.
Right.
But I'm talking about what's literally there.
I think I can't grasp that.
Yeah.
Because like I'm looking at this kitty and like, this is a kitty. You can't look at him and be like, that's a rug.
Right. So if you think of it, the physicists talk about it in terms of, the phrase they use is a superposition of probabilities. There's like a cloud of probabilities. If Mochi is in here by himself, when we open the door, there's a certain, let's say there's a 30% chance he'll be sleeping on the table. Let's say there's a 10% chance he'll be sleeping in one of the chairs. Let's say there's a 50% chance he'll be sleeping on the floor, and a 10% chance he'll be standing on a windowsill looking out the window. There are these probabilities that contain all of the possible outcomes. And until we open the door, we don't know which one is the actuality.
Okay.
And the idea is that when we open the door, and we make the observation, like we see, oh, he's on the windowsill. What we have done when we observed him is basically invited God to write the story that puts him there. Before we opened the door, he was in all these places at once. But when we open the door, he's in one place. And when we observe, God fills in all the details.
There was a book I read once, I think by Ted Decker, who is I think a
Circle
Christian.
series, right?
Yeah, but not that one.
Okay.
There's a different one. Somehow this like young man suddenly has this ability to see all of the possible. Basically, he finds himself in like a chase story, and he's got to rescue like a Saudi princess who's trying to escape or something.
Yeah.
And he's like tells her to go hide in the bathroom, and then suddenly has like visions of the like 8 different possibilities that the chase people who are chasing them might do. They might do this, or they might do this, and then like he can sort of see the continuation of the timeline based on each of those choices. And so he can choose. He has this unique ability to choose, well, I don't want that one to happen because we die, so I'm gonna do this, and I'm gonna like duck under the stall instead of opening the door directly, like whatever the thing is. And that, like getting kind of that picture of I don't know, science fiction or what fantasy, however you want to call it, made me start thinking, oh, maybe that's how God knows simultaneously everything and also what we're going to do and the next step. Because like, it's the general argument, well, how can I have free will if he knows everything? Well, both. he knows everything and he knows what you're going to choose and he's already working it out for your good.
Right.
So we open the door and suddenly we go, oh, Mochi's on the windowsill. And he could have been on the floor and there could have been a next step if he was already on the floor. But because he's on the windowsill, it's like a slightly different timeline.
Yeah. Basically, until each of us observes a thing, it has not happened. So like Donald Trump, the president, is somewhere right now.
Right.
But since you and I don't know where he is, he could be anywhere.
Right.
And depending on who we are in our being, depending on the condition of our soul, when we find out where he is, he will be in a different place.
What?
Yeah.
No, let's start over.
Okay.
The condition of our soul, what does that mean? And two, why will he be in a different place than where he is?
So, the way I understand this
Why don't I understand this?
Because it's hard.
Okay.
So, regarding the condition of our soul, a person whose soul is very burdened and darkened will collapse probabilities in a way different from a person whose soul is radiant and pure and virtuous. So when I open the door to see Mochi, if you were to open the door and see Mochi, we would each see different things, because my soul and your soul have different qualities and it will have different effects on physical reality.
Okay, this might be a small problem because
Sure.
Mochi has some free will. He could decide to be on the floor or on the
So does Donald
windowsill.
Trump. So does Donald Trump. What I'm trying to say here is that God rewrites the history of the universe at every moment according to the condition of your soul and mine.
For our good.
Yeah. He gives us not only the universe we need, but the history of the universe we need from moment to moment.
So, like, you and I meeting
Yeah.
well, the end of, despite our brokenness, was obviously written.
Yeah.
It wasn't an accident.
Right.
That's reassuring. This will probably take a couple days to percolate.
Sure. This is also why in the Surrender Novena, Jesus says, when you totally and completely surrender something to me, it cannot fail to have the effect desired, because I use all my omnipotence to do it. What he's saying here is that when the condition of our soul changes to no longer be clutching a particular outcome, but instead entrusting it to God, then when we observe that thing again, the probabilities collapse differently than when we were clutching it.
Okay, so I want an example from our life.
Sure, an example from our life. Let's say we are wearing green sunglasses, so everything we see is green because we're thinking about money. Oh man, where's the money?
Yes.
I'm worried about money.
Yes.
And we do the Surrender Novena, and Jesus says,
Take off your glasses.
completely surrender the issue of money to me, and I will use all my omnipotence. So we unburden our soul from concern about money. We hand it over to Jesus in radical trust. Because we have taken the green out of our lenses, now we have yellow lenses. Different. Not perfectly clear, but different because they don't have the green in them.
Right, okay.
And now when we look around with our different lenses, we see, as we're, walking around the house, a big green pile of money over there that we couldn't see because our green lenses had prevented us from seeing it.
Oh, that's so on point. Okay, keep going.
And so what we observe in physical reality is different because of the condition of our soul.
Okay, hang on. The Native Americans who had never seen a ship before could not see the ship. It's directly right in front of them.
Right.
But they could not see it. Oh, okay. This is why atheists can't see God. And this is why I couldn't read the Bible, but now I can, sort of. And every time I read it, I'm discovering, oh, well, that's very clear. What was I reading before?
Right. So,
interesting.
And it's also why...
Oh, the condition of our soul.
Yes.
Okay, so I'm attached to too many selfish outcomes, which makes it hard for me to see what we already have. Okay. Selfishness and gratitude. I have too many selfish attachments. Therefore, I cannot appreciate what we already have. And when I work on detaching from those things, or even go the easier route, just start focusing in on, oh wow, look at this house. Oh wow, look at this cat. Look at our car that works. Look at our neighbors, which are so nice, who are so nice. That's one way to also start detaching. And then I can start seeing things more clearly. And you can go either direction. You could focus on detaching from things, and then you'll be able to see the piles of money in the corner, or the happy neighbors, or the happy cat. Or intentionally focus on the things that you have, and then that will also help you detach from things. So the condition of my soul. Okay, so we come in the room, and the condition of my soul, for some reason, determines whether Mochi is on the floor or on the windowsill for my greater good.
Yeah.
Which is a weird example because it's hard to connect to my greater good.
Right.
But God is rewriting everything all the time for my greater good. We're closing in on something.
We're closing in. Let me do one more illustration.
Okay. Would you like to show this kitty? She's so cute.
Hi, buddy. Oh, yes. My kitty. I have
On the left, not the window.
another audience member here. Yes. Okay. So this is one way to conceive of the condition of our soul for the purposes of this conversation.
You don't have to leave, Moch. You don't have to leave. Since the condition of your soul has changed, so he's left.
Yeah. I'm sorry, Moch. I'm fallen, and you just have to deal with it. So, the condition of our soul. Here's God. There's God, right? That's how it tends to be depicted. And here's us. And then they give us like a big body here for a reason.
Okay.
Legs, arms, here's us. So we have cares. We have things that we care about and need, and they are different, and we carry them around in here, and they have to get, dealt with somehow. These are the things we feel we need and feel we lack and care about. And typically, we try to get them from the outside. Let's say this is money. And we have, an office building. We have the concept of a job out here. Office building, lots of glass windows. And so we sort of, we try to meet this need with this external thing. And we sort of create this loop, like a subscription. We subscribe to the idea, we approve of the idea, and rely on the idea that money comes from this job out here. And when this goes away...
Doesn't it?
When this goes away, when the office building goes away, we go, oh no, how can I get money if it comes from this because I subscribe to this fulfillment of it? And when we do the surrender novena, instead we do this. We stop trying to carry this in ourselves, and we subscribe to the idea that money comes from God. And so instead of having this loop where the external world either gives us good feelings or bad feelings, we depend on God for it, and God gives us whatever He wants to give us. And thus, the condition of our soul improves, because we are not nourished by the office building and its conditions. We are nourished by God.
Okay, but here's where I always go, okay, this makes sense, but like sometimes He doesn't give us money.
This is true.
I guess that's also for our good, in that if he's doing it or allowing it, then it must be for our good.
Yeah. Yeah, basically what we rely on feeds us. And so if we rely on circumstances, they will feed us however whimsically and poorly and limitedly they will.
Yeah.
But if we rely on God, whether the circumstances come about or not, He will feed us and improve the condition of our soul.
Which is the ultimate good.
Yes, and it's not only the ultimate good because it's the ultimate good, but it's the ultimate practical good because it purifies our vision and allows us to see all the things.
This other opportunity for money that He's providing.
Precisely.
This makes sense. I was praying about this today. I'm glad you chose the money problem. So stop relying on external circumstances. Rely more on God. Relying on God will improve the condition of my soul, which will then allow me to see more clearly the other opportunities He's providing, which will probably provide money. It's a big ask. It's a good thing we're Catholic and go to Mass and receive the Holy Eucharist. All right, time for a meditative nap.
Okay. This has been fun. Thank you for coming on this journey with us. Hope something made sense. God bless you and goodbye.